Hello, everyone. I'm Tom, 37, and I was married to my ex-wife Sarah, 30 years old, for over 3 years. We were two peas in a pod, and I never would have imagined she would destroy everything we had by cheating on me. Even as I tell this story, my heart feels like it's carrying a ton of bricks. I hope that sharing this will somehow help me feel better. Sarah and I met a few years back at a street festival in our town. For some reason, I kept bumping into her, despite the crowd. The last time we collided, we had to stop and laugh because we had crossed paths at least 6 times that day. I believe the universe was trying to send me a message with this average-height, green-eyed blonde woman I couldn't seem to avoid. I felt compelled to talk to her. Our conversation flowed smoothly, and everything about her seemed perfect. She sounded really intelligent, and during our chat, I learned she had just started her career as a physics professor at our state college. That was a big deal, mainly because she didn't look the part. If you weren't careful, you'd think she had just graduated from college because of her youthful appearance. Initially, I didn't think Sarah and I would end up dating. I mostly saw her as an intelligent friend who sometimes intimidated me with her smarts. But as we spent more time together and got to know each other better, I fell for her. She loved my company too, and about 2 months after we met, she started sharing a bed with me. She would occasionally come to my house for advice whenever she was having issues with her then boyfriend. As time passed, we became intimate. I know we shouldn't have, but she told me she was on the verge of breaking up with her boyfriend. A few weeks after our intimacy began, she broke up with him. She said he didn't match up with her intellectually, and his personality was totally different from hers. Although her excuse for breaking up with her boyfriend didn't sit well with me, I was glad we were together. Little did I know, I was setting myself up for a trap. Eventually, we dated for 9 months, and then got married. I was madly in love with her, and believed she would be the woman who would heal me with her love, and hopefully, we would grow old together. Before Sarah and I married, we agreed to have children early because I loved kids and didn't want to wait until I was 40 to be a dad. I wanted to spend enough time with my kids, grow with them, and shower them with the fatherly love I never had. Our plan was perfect initially, but about a year after we married, Sarah couldn't conceive. This became more heartbreaking for me in the second year of our marriage, because we tried everything possible and ran a series of tests to find out why she couldn't conceive. But everything was fine. Without her knowledge, I even did some tests to make sure I wasn't the problem, and each time, the results came back fine. Unlike Sarah, I was worried because I expected we would at least have a child by the second year of our marriage, but that didn't happen. To be honest, it made me sad. I know it's usually a woman's thing to be obsessed with kids, but in our situation, Sarah didn't seem bothered. Her usual phrase was, "Don't worry, we'll have a child when the time is right," and she would carry on with whatever she was doing. At one point, I had to stop mentioning it because she made me feel like I was overdoing it or blaming her for our inability to have kids, so I stopped. I know this information is very sensitive and I'm not supposed to share it here, but it's crucial for me that I do, and at the end of my story, you'll understand why. Despite not having a child, I didn't let it weigh down our marriage. I took it as an opportunity to bond more with Sarah and enjoy her company before the children came. But as time passed, I noticed Sarah began to change. A couple of months later, we were like strangers living under the same roof. From the beginning, I never imagined that Sarah and I would become a couple. Initially, I viewed her primarily as an exceptionally intelligent friend who sometimes made me feel a bit intimidated by her brilliance. However, as we spent more and more time together and learned more about each other, my feelings for her began to deepen. She enjoyed my company just as much, and within about 2 months of our first meeting, she started staying over at my place. She would often visit me seeking advice whenever she had issues with her boyfriend at the time. As we continued to grow closer, we became romantically involved. Although I knew it was risky, she reassured me by saying she was close to ending her relationship with her boyfriend. Not long after we became intimate, she broke up with him. She cited their intellectual incompatibility and vastly different personalities as reasons. While her rationale for the breakup left me feeling uneasy, I was nevertheless happy that we were together. Unbeknownst to me, I was heading into a complicated situation. We eventually dated for 9 months before getting married. My love for her was profound, and I was convinced she was the one who would heal my wounds with her love. I envisioned us growing old together. Before tying the knot, We agreed on having children early since I cherished the idea of becoming a father before turning 40. I wanted to be a present and active part of my children's lives, sharing with them the fatherly love I never experienced. Initially, our plan seemed flawless, but about a year into our marriage, Sarah was unable to conceive. This reality became increasingly distressing for me in our second year together, as we explored all possible solutions and underwent numerous tests to determine the cause of her infertility. Yet every test result indicated that everything was normal. Secretly, I even underwent tests myself to ensure that I wasn't the problem, and each time the results confirmed that I was fine. Unlike Sarah, I became increasingly anxious as I had hoped we would have a child by our second year of marriage. The unfulfilled expectation weighed heavily on me, making me feel despondent. Traditionally, it is often the woman who is most preoccupied with having children. But in our case, Sarah appeared untroubled. Her constant reassurance was, "Don't worry, we'll have a child when the time is right," and she would resume her activities without much concern. Eventually, I stopped bringing up the topic, as her reaction made me feel like I was overreacting or unfairly blaming her for our childlessness. Consequently, I ceased mentioning it. I am aware that sharing this information is sensitive and perhaps inappropriate for this setting, but it is imperative that I do so, and by the end of my story you will understand the significance. Despite our inability to conceive, I endeavored not to let it affect our marriage. Instead, I saw it as an opportunity to strengthen my bond with Sarah and savor her companionship before any children arrived. However, over time, I began to notice subtle changes in Sarah's behavior. A few months later, it felt as though we were merely cohabiting as strangers under the same roof. For example, I worked as a construction worker, and even without meeting most of my colleagues and clients, Sarah knew their names, how they looked, their behaviors, and attitudes. This was because we had the habit of telling each other details of our day at work. Also, I knew the names of the students who took her course, how they looked, and everything else. Without meeting them, I knew the students who were giving her a tough time, and the cool ones. This was possible because Sarah used to talk a lot about her students and her day at work in general. You're wondering how things changed. I'll tell you. Our whole daily conversation just stopped. I couldn't explain why everything changed. Initially, when it started, I thought she was having a bad day, but her bad day turned into bad weeks, and the weeks rolled into months. We could go weeks without bonding like we used to, and if I tried to start a conversation, she would either say that she was busy at the moment or that we would talk later, which never happened. As if that wasn't enough, our intimacy was reduced. It got to the point where I started begging to touch her, but no matter how much I tried, she would never agree. Instead, she would get offended and walk out of the bedroom. Whenever she did, it was a slap on my ego, and it broke my heart. I thought she was denying me my husband's rights and was trying to avoid us having a child. But because I loved her so much, I was patient and tried not to make a big deal out of it. As funny as it sounds, I believe she would realize she was pushing me away and would try to make things right. But that never happened. Instead, she grew more distant, and we almost became beefing roommates because our communication dropped terribly. At this point, you might be thinking I should have done some investigating to find out why she suddenly changed. But I didn't. Our relationship continued to deteriorate, and I felt more and more isolated. I tried to rekindle our old bond, doing everything I could think of to make her happy and bring us back together. But it was as if I was invisible to her. My efforts seemed to go unnoticed, and the emotional distance between us only grew. I felt helpless and heartbroken, unable to understand what had caused this drastic shift in her behavior. My love for Sarah kept me hoping for a turnaround, but deep down I feared that something irreversible had happened to our once loving relationship. I was blinded by love and wanted things to work out between us. In my desperation, I made a compromising decision, hoping it would change things between us. I had a conversation with Sarah and told her it didn't matter if we had a child or not. If she wanted, we could spend the rest of our lives without a child. This seemed to cheer her up for the whole week. She changed a bit, and her intimacy returned. Even though it felt like I was forcing myself on her, it was better than nothing. Exactly a week later, she reverted to her cold, distant self. It was almost as if she had been faking the new change for just a week, and once she was done, she took off the happy mask. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Our once vibrant conversations dwindled into mere exchanges of basic pleasantries, if even that. I would come home from work, eager to share my day, to hear about hers, to find solace and companionship in our usual evening chats. But those moments grew rarer. Sarah would often be engrossed in something else, dismissing my attempts to engage with a brief later that never came. The nights were the hardest. We had shared everything, dreams, fears, secrets, and now the bed felt like a cold, vast expanse separating us. She started to avoid any physical closeness. I would reach out, craving a touch, a sign of affection, only to be met with rejection. It was not just the physical intimacy that dwindled. It was the emotional connection that seemed to be slipping away, thread by thread. I tried to be understanding, patient, hoping it was a phase, but it wasn't. My attempts to initiate any form of intimacy were met with resistance, and each time she pulled away, it felt like a part of my heart was being torn. I began to feel desperate, questioning everything, trying to pinpoint the moment when things started to go wrong. I couldn't fathom why she was shutting me out, and the more I tried to bridge the gap, the wider it seemed to become. I started to wonder if there was something I had done, or failed to do, that caused this rift. Yet no matter how much I racked my brain, I couldn't find an answer. I even started to doubt myself, thinking maybe I was overreacting, but the pain was real, and the distance between us was undeniable. Our home, which was once filled with laughter, shared dreams, and mutual support, now felt like a battleground of silence and unspoken tensions. I tried different approaches, from romantic gestures to serious talks, but nothing seemed to reach her. The woman I fell in love with, who once shared every detail of her life with me, was now a stranger living under the same roof. I felt helpless, watching the love of my life slip away, unable to do anything to stop it. My heart ached for the connection we once had, the simple joys of sharing our lives with each other. It was heartbreaking to see her so distant, as if she had built an invisible wall that I couldn't penetrate. And despite all my efforts, all my hopes, things just kept getting worse. In a moment of desperation, I made a significant compromise, hoping it would bring us back together. I told her we didn't have to have children if that was what she truly wanted. For a brief moment, it seemed to work. She smiled, and for a week, it felt like I had my wife back. We were closer, more intimate, and I started to believe that maybe we could get through this. But it was short-lived. Just as quickly as she had come back, she withdrew again, leaving me more confused and hurt than before. It felt like a cruel joke, giving me a glimpse of hope only to snatch it away. It was in those moments that I realized something had fundamentally changed, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't reach her anymore. This was incredibly frustrating for me. It affected my work and my ability to sleep. When I hear how couples say they can go a whole week without connecting or talking to each other while living in the same house, I wonder how they do it because in my situation, it was taking a mental toll on me. On the other hand, Sarah didn't care. She would return from work in a great mood, make dinner or lunch for herself, and focus on her books and laptop for the rest of the evening. When she was tired, she would go to bed. The following day, she would repeat the same cycle and leave me to wallow in my loneliness. Towards our third anniversary, I decided to make things right by celebrating her the whole week. I bought her something nice and took her to a new fancy restaurant that had recently opened in our town. I had already made preparations and reserved a table for us. Even after reminding her with text messages all day, she didn't show up. She didn't even return home that night. She claimed she slept over at a fellow professor's house while working on a project. That was the last straw that broke the camel's back for me. I had had enough. I was emotionally drained, mentally sick, and tired of everything happening. I had been battling with the thought of Sarah cheating on me, but I chose to give her the benefit of the doubt. I guess I refused to admit there was a possibility of her cheating on me because of how broken and devastated I would be to find out that the woman I loved and adored was having an affair with someone else. So, after everything that happened on the week of our anniversary, I did some digging. I found one of those private investigators online and hired him to see if Sarah was up to something behind my back. While the private investigator followed Sarah around, I tried to do some digging on my own. On the nights I knew she was utterly exhausted and deeply asleep, I'd use her fingerprint to unlock her phone and go through it. I had seen many stories of wives cheating on their husbands, and how they found out by going through their wives' phones. So, I searched for dating apps, checked her emails, both personal and work, and checked her social media. I searched for contacts saved with suspicious names and emojis. After minutes of searching, I couldn't find anything. The next day when she woke up, I asked if I could borrow her laptop to do something, and she gave it to me with glee. I used the opportunity to go through her laptop, hoping to discover a hidden app or social media account, but she was as clean as a whistle. There was no trace or evidence that she was cheating on me. I even began to feel bad for hiring a private investigator to invade her privacy. Since it was a weekend, I wanted to call the private investigator to back off and explain to him that I was only being paranoid, but I decided to wait until Monday since Sarah was mostly home on weekends. Eventually Monday came, and I called the private investigator to back off. But he said he had gathered a few things he would love me to see. Before I could tell him to back off, he mentioned he had some important evidence. Honestly, folks, I almost had a heart attack. Before meeting up with the investigator, that was the longest drive of my life. Throughout the 15-minute drive, all sorts of thoughts crossed my mind. Ultimately, I met with the private investigator, and what I feared the most happened. Sarah was seeing someone. Looking at the pictures of them walking hand in hand, going to different places, broke my heart. I'll admit, I cried. I had always been emotionally soft, and couldn't believe Sarah was cheating on me. They even went to the new restaurant I had booked for us. There were also pictures of them making out in Sarah's car, going into a hotel together, and hanging out late at night. Well, it turned out the project Sarah was working on was the man in her arms. The most heartbreaking part was he was younger, and definitely in his early 20s. My investigator gathered that her lover was a final-year physics student named Ryan, and Sarah was his professor. The moment my private investigator mentioned his name, it rang a bell, and my heart sank. In the past, Sarah had mentioned Ryan to me many times, and she praised him a lot because he was super intelligent and never gave her a tough time. He was also one of her best students, and I knew she talked about him regularly because she loved intelligent people. But I never imagined she would stoop so low and cheat on me with her student. I was so heartbroken and angered at the same time. In the past 3+ years, I sacrificed a lot for Sarah and ensured life was comfortable for her. I did most of the cooking, cleaning, and grocery shopping because she always complained about being tired. The only thing Sarah did was the laundry, and she took care of that on weekends while I handled the rest. The splitting of bills was 70-30, with me taking the larger share because I believed it was my responsibility as a man to cover most of the bills. I wanted to help so she could save some money. I thought it was normal to try and help out the one you love, and that was exactly what I did. The worst part was my mother not supporting my relationship and marriage with Sarah. But I married her anyway, which shook my relationship with my mom. After recapping the past and returning to my reality, I got my act together and asked my private investigator to keep following Sarah. I was unsatisfied with just the picture evidence and wanted something more concrete. I wanted to catch them in the act. When I got home that day, I didn't say a word or confront her, despite how angry and tempted I was. I wanted to leave the house because I feared I might harm her in her sleep. So, I packed a couple of clothes from the closet. In the process, I found something that destroyed whatever love was left in my heart for Sarah. I found birth control pills, packs of birth control pills, carefully tucked under a pile of folded clothes. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. How long had this been going on? How many lies had she told? I thought back to all the nights she came home late, claiming she had to work on her project. All the times she was too tired to be intimate with me, saying she was stressed from work. It all made sense now. The late-night texts she claimed were from colleagues, the sudden interest in looking her best even on weekends. I felt like a fool, and the betrayal cut deeper than I ever imagined possible. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the pills, my mind racing with thoughts of betrayal and heartbreak. I had given my all to this relationship, believing that we were building a future together. Now it felt like everything was crumbling around me. I knew I had to confront her, but I needed to do it right. I needed to catch her in the act, to have undeniable proof that she couldn't talk her way out of. The next few days were torture. I continued to act as if everything was normal, all the while my investigator was gathering more evidence. Every time Sarah looked at me, I wondered if she could see the pain and anger in my eyes. Did she suspect that I knew, Did she care? Finally, the day came. My investigator had followed them to a secluded spot, and I knew this was it. I followed him, my heart pounding in my chest. We arrived, and I saw them together, laughing and holding hands, oblivious to the world around them. My heart shattered into a million pieces, but I held my ground, determined to see this through. I confronted them, my voice shaking with anger and pain. Sarah's face turned pale, and Ryan looked like a deer caught in headlights. The truth was out, and there was no denying it. Sarah tried to explain, to justify her actions, but I was beyond listening. I had all the proof I needed, and there was no going back. I walked away that day, knowing that my life would never be the same. The betrayal had cut deep, but I was determined to move forward, to rebuild my life without Sarah. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, but I knew it was the only way to heal and find peace again. Initially, it didn't make sense to me because Sarah couldn't conceive. We had tried for 2 years, and nothing happened, so she had no reason to take birth control pills. Unless, of course, she was trying to prevent getting pregnant. Almost immediately, it dawned on me that she had been taking birth control pills the whole time. She was the reason she couldn't conceive, yet she allowed me to worry and think something was wrong with us. I held the birth control pills and cried bitterly. Finding out she was on birth control pills hurt me more than knowing she cheated on me with a younger guy. I left the house and told her I would visit my mother and return that weekend. I wasn't. It was bait, and I hoped she would take it. I had to lodge at a hotel that night to clear my head. The following day, my PI notified me that he had been following Sarah the whole afternoon, and it seemed like she and her affair partner were heading to my house. This was precisely what I wanted. I had seen videos of men bursting in on their cheating wives, and I was ready to go all out for her. I spiced things up by hiring a videographer and paying him to follow me. Shortly after Sarah and Ryan arrived at my house, I arrived too, but I waited for them to settle. About 15 minutes later, I went into the house with my videographer. She never locks the front door, and I could bet on that, especially when she knew I wasn't coming home until the weekend. We crept to the room, and no one heard us because of the soft music playing in the living room. My stomach churned as I walked to our bedroom door. Without wasting time, I kicked the door open and had the videographer record Ryan standing behind Sarah as they did it. The next minute, they were scurrying for their clothes like rats. As soon as she wrapped her head around what was going on, she started screaming and yelling at me. I was so angry that I pulled her by the arm and threw her out of the house naked. Her affair partner managed to put on his pants and ran out before I could return to him. It was a terrible scene. She yelled and banged on my door, and the neighbors were forced to come out and see what was going on. When she realized what she had done, she ran into her car and drove off with Ryan. Long story short, that same day, which was 2 weeks ago, I forwarded all the pictures my PI gathered and the video from the videographer to the college she worked at. I got the idea from one of the stories I read online. I knew how it would end, and things turned out as expected. The following week, she was fired, and her dear lover was expelled in his final year. Now the thing is, I thought all the pain and anger would go away after I ruined their careers, but nothing has changed. I even feel more terrible now because Sarah has been blowing up my phone, promising to make my life miserable since I ruined hers. I'm so confused right now. Wow, this is definitely a blow to the ego that I didn't need. At first, it seemed like her attitude towards me was due to her own thoughts and feelings of not being able to start a family with me, as if she was battling her own inner demons. Turns out she was exercising a demon, all right, in the bedroom. I'm so sorry she lied to me like that for so long and made me worry that I was unable to have children. That's so cruel to do to someone you claim to love. Moreover, I wonder how she was able to hide all this on her electronics. At the same time, I did start the relationship under shady circumstances. I knew she was still with her then boyfriend at the time, and yet we still pursued each other. I'm not saying I was asking for this, but it definitely didn't start off with the best intentions. This situation is really taking a toll on me. The betrayal is too much to bear. Every time I close my eyes, I see her with him, and it tears me apart inside. I've tried to move on, but her constant threats and messages make it impossible for me to find peace. I don't know how to handle this anymore. It's like I'm stuck in a nightmare I can't wake up from. I need help, but I don't know where to turn. The pain is unbearable, and I'm not sure how much longer I can keep going like this. Update. Hey everyone, I really appreciate all your comments and support. A lot of you are saying that our marriage was rushed and that I should have taken more time to get to know her better. Honestly, I didn't feel that our marriage was rushed at the time. I was deeply in love and didn't see anything wrong with getting married after 9 months of dating. I even know couples who dated for only 4 months and have been happily married for over 20 years now. Regardless, I accept my mistake, and if I ever fall in love again, I'll make sure to date long enough to truly understand my partner. You guys are also right. Sarah breaking up with her ex-boyfriend to be with me was a major red flag, and I should have seen that she might do the same to me once she found someone new. I just never expected things to turn out this way. Recently, I met with Sarah and gave her the divorce papers. She was completely shocked that I wanted a divorce, and instead of signing, she laughed. She claimed she was doing me a favor by marrying me, and that I was too dumb for her from the beginning. That really hurt, but I covered it up with a smile. Until 2 days ago, and the day I caught her red-handed, I had never seen her for the beast she truly was. Now it feels like a veil has been lifted from my eyes, and I'd rather experience this heartbreak now than end up raising another man's child, only to realize later that she was cheating on me the entire time. The part that really messed with my head was that she showed absolutely no remorse. Instead, she kept talking about how lucky I was to be with her, and how I wouldn't last a month without begging her to take me back. She refused to sign the divorce papers. She took them instead, saying she was giving me time to get over my hurt feelings and reconsider the mistake I was about to make. The audacity! If only she knew there could never be an us again. She still doesn't know I found the birth control pills, and I haven't mentioned anything about it. I thought she would bring up her being fired for breaking the rules, but she didn't. She focused more on trying to convince me to come back to her. Anyway, I'll update you all again as soon as she signs the divorce papers. She only said all that to hurt me because she's angry at herself for getting caught. She had to say those things to try to scare me into coming back because, in reality, she has nothing without me. She can't cook or clean for herself. Update 2. Hey guys, your comments have helped me immensely, and I cannot thank you all enough for the support. It's true, Sarah was trying to manipulate me. She knew I was a weak spot and wanted to exploit that. I did as you all advised, and she eventually signed the divorce papers. I'm happy to announce that we are officially divorced, and she's out of my life for good. My apologies for not making this update earlier. After we divorced, I needed some quiet time to process everything, so I went off social media for a few weeks. I wouldn't have believed it if someone had told me that Sarah would break down in a matter of weeks. The last time we met for her to sign the divorce papers, she acted tough, like she was the only woman on earth. But after we divorced, she turned into a completely different person. She kept blowing up my phone and sending me multiple messages on Facebook. I was even forced to block her number and block her on social media, but that didn't stop her from trying to contact me. Some days ago, she showed up at my front door looking miserable and in tears. Some people had commented that she would return, but I didn't believe them at the time. When I opened the door, she immediately went on her knees and started crying. She begged me to take her back, promising she would turn a new leaf and change her ways. She talked about how hard life had been without me, and said she had nowhere to stay, and her car was about to get repossessed if I didn't help her. She had lost her job, and due to her tarnished reputation, wasn't able to find any other work. She had wasted all her savings on her student boyfriend, treating him to the best restaurants and gifting him the fanciest clothes. Now she's completely broke. Seeing her there enraged me again, and I tried to shut the door in her face, but she pushed forward. When her first pleas didn't work, she pulled a different card and said she had a confession to make. She exhaled deeply and explained that she couldn't get pregnant for the 2 years we tried because she was on birth control pills. She said she took them because she wasn't ready to become a mother back then, but now she was ready, and if I took her back, she would get pregnant, and in a few months we would have the child I've always wanted, and we'd be a big happy family. I allowed her to explain herself, and after she was done, I told her I knew about the birth control pills she was taking. The expression on her face was worth framing. Before she could say another word, I told her that even if I could forgive her for cheating on me, I could never forgive her for making a fool out of me. She watched as I worried for her and myself. I even prayed every night for us because I had run out of options, and prayer was the only thing left. I did many tests, yet she didn't say a word. She kept repeating her dumb phrase, and I believed we were on the same page. It's partially my fault. I should have suspected she knew something when she was acting less concerned, but I felt I was being paranoid. As I spoke, I could see her face slowly changing from desperation to realization that her pleas were falling on deaf ears. It was clear she hadn't expected me to stand my ground. I told her she needed to leave and that she couldn't manipulate her way back into my life. She stood there for a moment, silent and defeated, before turning and walking away. I haven't heard from her since, and I hope it stays that way. I appreciate all of you who took the time to comment and offer support. It's been a tough journey, but I'm relieved it's over. I'll keep you updated on what happens next in my life. Thanks again for everything, and I am truly grateful for the support and advice. There's no need to ask if I took her back. I wouldn't be so stupid. I asked her to get off my property and promised to have her arrested if she showed up again. I guess it's just me now. I've never been heartbroken in the past, but I've never been so let down and devastated. Any suggestions on how to move on faster would be appreciated. Thank you everyone for all the comments and advice. It has really helped me. Of course, life is hard without me. Who's going to clean up after her now? She has to do that herself. She sure did have some guts to ask me to take her back and start a family. What an absolute train wreck and delusional buffoon to think I'd actually take her back. It's a blessing I didn't end up having a child with her. I'd be trying to fight for custody of a child that might not even be mine, and who needs that kind of stress? There's a woman out there for me, and I'll have the beautiful family I've always wanted. There's still time. Don't feel like I have to follow societal pressures. Everyone's timeline looks different. All the best. Would you have figured something was up? Do you have a similar story?